For the budget cabinet meeting, we've only got one item on the agenda, so hopefully it should be a quick meeting. Membership of cabinet. I've got apologies from Councillor Muskan, who's not well, and Councillor Graham Turner, who's actually on council cabinet business in Glasgow. So we'll just note their apologies. Item 2, declaration of interest. Any interest? Please complete the forms. And I'm assuming everybody in this room who will vote have got the council tax up to date. I just need to ask that. Item 3, admission of the public. We don't have any members of the public. Item 4, deputations and petitions. Any deputations, petitions? Questions by members of the public. There are no members of the public. Item 6, questions by elected members. Any elected members want to ask a question? Councillor John Lawson. John? No details have been finalised, no time slots have been set, but as soon as they do, you will be one of the first to be done. I can't rule anything in or rule anything out. We have to go through the formal process whenever that happens. Did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Here when it's coming and going. All right, I'll just stay like this. So no, no pool question. It's two different questions. Both, one of them is to do with what seems to be a speedy move to academies, at least in our part of the world. I was at a meeting on the 9th of Feb at Neil's School, where there was a consultation about moving it to academy status, part of the Heights Academy, along with Combe Valley High. And I'm afraid, as someone who was obviously fairly anti-academies, being an ex-teacher, I was really concerned at the one-sided view they were getting. There was a person talking about them who I thought, oh, he must be a principal from the academy. Oh no, he was a private consultant, telling them that future-proof the school and follow government pay scales, and that was the first consultation that the school had had. They said they invited someone from the council, no one came. I was the only one there pushing all the negatives that I know about academies. And of course there is this overriding thing that people believe, that the government want the current government want all schools to be academies by 2030. And so some schools are feeling that they have to get in now. And I just want the council doing to sort of fight this, as it were, because there was no one at that meeting. They said they invited someone from the council to that meeting, but I was the lone voice saying, you know, you can pay them what you like, the principals will take what salaries they like.
Alison, are you aware of the situation? If not, I'm assuming that you'll get back to her, but I'll leave you to answer.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not aware of Neil's in particular, I mean, or that particular meeting, but I do know many of our schools have felt, who are our maintained schools, have felt vulnerable, being left a bit in limbo, not knowing that the government was saying, I have to say they've now dropped that policy. They are not now requiring schools to become academies by 2030. That's sort of news relatively hot off the press from, I think it's Friday before last now, when they announced that. I mean, they still wish to see schools become academies, but they're not forcing them to become so by 2030. We are aware that there are predatory, as we call them, academy chains trying to take over or encourage smaller schools, which Neil's is, to join their academy trust. The council is holding a meeting for maintained school heads in the very near future, beginning of March, where we will discuss with them the benefits of staying with the local authority, what it is that the local authority can offer by way of support and protection, especially for small schools, and also we want to assure them that there is no need to jump to the nearest academy chain which comes knocking on their door. I mean, well aware that has been the case, but that isn't the case anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask if that information will be given out to heads as soon as possible about not having to be trusts, because I've had this conversation quite a bit with a number of people that they feel they have to do it. And in Neil's school, the driver for that was they've got endless damp in the school that is, hadn't been able to be dealt with by the council, and, monies and all the rest of it. So I just want you to be aware of that. The second question is going to be a bit more controversial, and I apologise. I've tried really hard not to support council, and I think I've always said that I would, for the most part, support, except on environmental matters. Now, I was just saying to someone earlier, when you're a fairly new councillor, you're never quite sure what you can and can't do. And in 2020, we were first informed about housing in Lingard's Road. I didn't think it was anything to do with me because Rob and Donna were on planning, and to me, planning was boring. I probably still think planning's boring. However, I've now been an avalanche of complaints from residents about what happened in planning the week before last. I actually tried to come to a cabinet last week, but I was told it wasn't on. Anyway, I just want to tell you this. I have since written to Julie. And I've named them to Julie. I don't necessarily have to name them here. Made it very clear that we development because the council could not afford it, which is actually not protocol. That was said by both Tyler. Well, I'm not meant to say the names. Sorry. The question is that I wanted you to be informed that the group are writing to the Secretary of State to ask for a callback, and they're also asking for Royal Planning Institute for a judicial review. There is a lot of concern that the planner was working in cahoots with S&M Buildings because another person at that meeting said we highly recommend those buildings.
Am
I out of order? I'm sorry, but I thought you needed to know this.
What it is, Raya, is I hear what you're saying. Can we talk after the meeting, because you are making some very serious allegations, and I don't think this is the right forum.
I'm speaking on behalf of the residents. You need to be clear about that.
You're also a councillor and you have a mandate to the council,
which is why I'm here.
Absolutely. So can we pick that conversation up after the meeting? Because what you are saying is quite a serious allegation. And I think the best place would be if I can have a conversation with you after the meeting.
Well, it depends what time the meeting ends, because I've got other things I have to do.
If I don't speak to you straight after, I will...
Okay, that's okay. All right.
Okay. Members, any more questions? Councillor Firth. I hope you haven't got a question to the Cabinet, because you're part of the Cabinet.
I'd just like, if possible, Carol, to follow about the state of disrepair that you mentioned in this particular school. Obviously, I saw your eyebrows go up, Carol, and I think this does need addressing. Are you aware of any disrepair in the school?
Repair in specifics at Neil's, no. I am aware of other issues at Neil's. It's a small school, but and is working with them.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Councillor Firth. Right, members, we'll move on to the main item on the agenda, which is Council Budget Report 2023-24 and future years incorporating capital, treasury management, general fund revenue and housing revenue account. Councillor Paul Davies, can I ask you to present the report?
Thank you, Leader. And present this report with this. Certainly no surprise, we've managed to find a typo, so I'm just disappointed that Councillor Taylor is not here to hear us actually get that one before him. It's our annual typo, if you like. So page 35, section 5.2, very small change, where it refers to 10 a.m. On that particular sentence. It should be 12 noon. Okay?
Should resign.
Myself up afterwards. Thank you. Okay, so on to the budget itself. And after a year of economic turmoil, one thing that certainly we need from this budget, and that is to seek stability. If we've learnt anything about the financial management over the past few months, it's the stability matters. Just ask people whose mortgages skyrocketed in the autumn as a result of the government's catastrophic mini-budget. Or talk to someone whose business has suffered because they can't afford to invest in it due to hikes in interest rates or volatile exchange rates. Financial stability matters to the Council too. It's the very foundation on which we can deliver services to people who need them most. It's how we can support residents through the cost of living crisis. And it's how we can invest in the future to bring jobs and opportunities to local people. But just like every household in Kirklees, the Council has also been affected by the current economic headwinds. In total, various economic crises, some international and some very much homegrown, have added around £30 million to our costs. Through spiralling energy prices as well as inflationary pressures on pay, goods and services. But not all the challenges that we face in this budget are new. Kirklees remains underfunded compared to similar councils. Even the government agrees that the funding system needs to change. They reviewed the system, accepted the fact that there are iniquities, but have failed to implement change. And I'm sure some people are getting tired of me talking about the desperate need for fair funding for Kirklees. And I truly wish I didn't have to keep saying it, but it really does matter. We're talking about millions of pounds every year for vital services that we are missing. Fair funding isn't controversial. It's not even a political point. We stand alongside other councils of all political persuasions in calling for a fair deal. So this year's budget, more than any other, has laid bare the impact of the government's lack of action on funding. In total, the economic conditions, the structural problems with council funding and the demand on our services mean we've started this process with a budget gap of around 43 million. This budget seeks to overcome that extraordinary challenge and seek a balanced, stable budget. That means making choices. We've made a choice with our reserves. We will use 25 million to offset a large proportion of the deficit. We've maintained our reserves in recent years to protect residents from unforeseeable economic shocks. And it would really be an understatement to say that those shocks have now materialised. But it was only last year that opposition members were demanding that we spent them, as if we could rely on this government to pilot our economy with skill and responsibility. And I genuinely shudder to think of the impact on our services if we had taken that advice 12 months ago. We've made a choice on reserves, and we made choices on funding too. We prioritise services that support residents who need them most. That means protecting funding for adult social care and for children who may need more help to thrive. It's a budget that focuses on the front line. It maintains our library network, which is doing so much to support people through the cost of living crisis. And it delivers a support package that will see leisure services reopen at a time when the whole industry is under threat. This budget also maintains our long-term vision and ambition for transforming our economy. It plans around £1 billion injected into our infrastructure within the next decade. In an economic crisis, it's all too easy to think short-term. Look at opposition members who constantly tell us to delay, review or scrap schemes that will bring jobs and opportunities for our constituents. But this is an administration way to protect ourselves from future cost of living crises is to build a strong and sustainable economy. It means tough choices as well. To deliver that stability, we need to make around £19 million in savings. We reacted quickly to the economic crisis that came to a head in the autumn. We reduced recruitment, reviewed our use of buildings and rephased the capital programme. Those measures have had an impact on the current year, but will need to continue throughout the next financial year. Across services, our staff will be delivering efficiencies, finding new sources of funding and working hard to make sure every penny of taxpayers' money is spent where it's needed most. We owe it to our residents to deliver that efficiency. Unlike the vast majority of councils across the country, and every council in West Yorkshire, we're asking residents to pay an extra 2.99% in council tax. And will go directly into care services for older people and residents with disabilities through the government's adult social care precept. In the context of an ageing population, a crisis in our NHS, and increasing numbers of residents with complex needs, is essential to deliver stable funding for these vital services. For years, the government has outsourced higher taxes and service cuts to local authorities. This year is no different. In fact, in its autumn statement, the government assumed that virtually all councils will charge the maximum level of council tax. And so, that's come to pass. Even true blue councils, North Yorkshire, Kent, Windsor and Maidenhead, to name just a few, are all putting forward the same increase. That tells you all you need to know about how the cards are stacked against councils when it comes to council tax. And against this challenging background and the amount of volatility and work that's had to go into this budget, I absolutely want to thank all officers and cabinet members for their involvement in the work on this budget, and in particular to thank Eamon Crossan for his huge contribution to this. But as we've said before, the budget is more than an exercise in accountancy. It's about services and it's about people. It's been a whole council effort to put this budget together, and it'll be a whole council effort to deliver the stability we need. But if we're going to turn financial stability into sustainability for the long term, some key things need to change. We need a government that doesn't use the economy as some kind of experiment. In its place, we need productivity and sustainable economic growth. We need a fair funding deal to be finally delivered. We're not asking for special favours. Residents simply deserve a fair deal. We finally need a solution to social care funding. That, of course, will be good for residents and the NHS. Without these changes, councils like Kirklees will face even tougher choices next year. However, in the meantime, this is a budget that delivers stability for the coming financial year. I commend it to Cabinet and look forward to debating it at next month's council meeting. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Paul Davis. Councillor Wilson, you had your hand up?
Thank you very much, Shabir, and thank you to Paul, and particularly Eamon, but all of the finance and treasury team and everyone that's been involved in pulling together the budget, 'cause it's always a massive piece of work that takes a long time, and I know all councillors, irrespective of their group alignment, will be appreciative of all of that work. I'm obviously none of us become councillors to present budgets that reduce our investment in services. We all want to do better. Well, I think we do anyway. But it's one that we can't avoid. But in the circumstances, I'm really proud of the budget that we've put together, because it's one that, in really difficult circumstances, is protecting our services as best we can. But we also know, when we're upfront about the fact that we're not pretending that this isn't going to have any impact either. I'm really grateful to my officers. My officers and I have worked really closely together, and I'm pleased that we brought forward proposals in this budget that protects all of our ongoing climate projects in my portfolio. I think that's really important, and I'm appreciative of everyone that's supported that, because we're all committed and continue to remain committed to being ambitious around our climate targets. And the work that has been done around CAL of my colleagues, I think, has been exceptional, and proves that we've been listening to the people who've been concerned about their facilities, and I think we've got some really good work that's happened there as well. Like Councillor Davis said, though, we wouldn't be in this position of being able to do these things, of protecting the climate projects, of protecting CAL, of protecting so many other services across our portfolios, if we'd been listening to, in particular, the Conservative group amendments in recent years, which each year have proposed using what are so-called too much reserves that we've been apparently hoarding, despite the fact that we've been average for all of our likewise the country, telling us to use those reserves just before an election, funnily enough, to not increase council tax. I imagine now, when we go to full council with this, we'll be hearing, in fact, that we have got too much and we need to cut more. So interesting to hear the U-turn that we get from the Conservatives at the full council. We've got, as Paul said, all councils under a lot of pressure, particularly around council tax, and most councils are doing the same as us. There are some that aren't doing the same as us. Tory run Croydon, for example, has got a 15% council tax increase. But there is something that the government could do, because today the OBR have said that there is billions of pounds. I can't remember the exact figure, but I think it was over 10 billion. Was it 15, 30 billion? I don't know if anyone else has seen it. Billions of pounds of headroom from their projections because of an increase in some income and reductions in revenue, which means the government has a significant amount of headroom going into their upcoming budget. They could use that, if they wanted to fund councils more fairly, as we've been talking about, not just in this, but for many years. And as Paul said, the government have acknowledged that they need to do. They could use that to settle the pay disputes that we're seeing across the public sector and deal with the staff issues in the NHS. That means patients in Yorkshire and the Humber who have a heart attack are in, on average, over an hour for an ambulance to arrive. They could use that to protect our public services. I imagine they won't. I wait to be. I am surprised. But whatever they do, we'll continue to do everything we can. Services, we're not pretending it's going to be easy, because it's not. But I think this is a budget in the circumstances that we can be proud of, and I'm very pleased to support it.
I agree with much of Councillor Davis's analysis of where we stand financially as a council, and for some of the historical reasons, and of the as well as this government that's been exacerbated by this government. Because there is an unfairness not just in the country about where we get our funding and Also, within our own region, we do poorly in terms of funding. That said, we have an in-year budget in front of us that we have to make balance. And I've read some of the budget, not all of it. Just a couple of comments first, and then I'll get on to questions. And I do have a couple of questions. I hope you don't mind. Opposition members using reserves. That's the word. Yeah, but reading a budget report is not good for one's vocabulary, I can tell you. Using reserves year on year, I can assure the public that it was not the Liberal Democrat group that was advocating the use of those reserves. You'll be thinking. Just want to point that out straight away. Of our budget, sort of a little bit of a philosophical question to start with, which just to warm ourselves up. Talk about whole of council being part of this budget. I wish that were the case. It has not been whole of council. This has not been in sight, has not been in view until these cabinet papers were received. And these cabinet papers were received a week ago, and they are draft papers. This is a draft budget report, so there's not going to be a budget announced until the end of this meeting. With that in mind, we now have opposition groups now have a deadline of Monday noon. As Councillor Davis, do you think that that is reasonable, fair, or in good faith to leave opposition groups with 3 days to produce a budget amendment?
Any more questions from any cabinet members before I ask Councillor Paul Davis to come back in? Councillor Davis?
Thanks, Councillor Lawson. And you're right. Sometimes, going back to the earlier comment about the opposition, we do tend to, and I suppose on this side, we tend to fall into the habit sometimes of referring to the opposition when we sometimes should be more specific, perhaps, and refer to Conservatives. But you're absolutely right. It was the Conservative side of the chamber who asked us, in fact, sort of demanded that we spent our reserve. In terms of the process of the budget, certainly, I know this is, again, an issue that gets raised, on an annual basis. The process, as you know, is the same process that's been followed for quite a number of years. That doesn't mean that processes can't change and they can't be reviewed. You're right, the draft papers went out, though I would assume that members of the opposition groups would be working on the draft papers before this meeting, as well as after this meeting when they're confirmed. Certainly, I don't know the history in terms of whether there's been previous reviews, and Cathy may be able to respond in terms of the Democracy Commission have looked at consultation. But as far as I'm aware, certainly we feel as an administration that this process does work well. It does afford opportunities for the opposition to make comment, and certainly we have a full opportunity within council to debate it as well. I would not, it would be silly of me to say that processes won't be reviewed in the future, and I'm sure if this gets raised again, that could be something that would be considered, Leader.
Thank you very much. I don't have anybody else putting their hands up. Just a few comments from myself. I'm sure there'll be... Oh, sorry, Councillor John Lawson, you want to come back in again? My apologies.
Yeah, so I have several questions, if you don't mind, Chair. Well, we might as well just go through the questions, eh? We will be debating this, so I'll just ask a few specific questions. I couldn't see from my brief glimpse through the draft what stadium liabilities. I wanted to know if that has been addressed in this budget.
I'll certainly take that away and check on that one. I couldn't give you an answer on where it is in the documentation, but certainly you're aware that there are discussions going on between us and the stadium at the moment. So I'll pick that up. I will come back to you as quickly as possible on that one. Just check on that one for you, Councillor Lawson.
Okay, so that's a kind of, it's good, we think that's going to happen in year, so we're not sure how that's going to pan out, but it would be involved. It will be a multi-million pound figure, and it depends, I suppose, on how you spread that through oncoming years and how you decide to account.
Simply just a quick comment on it. I think, as you're aware, at the moment, it is that the commercial sensitivities around the discussions, are difficult. So it'll certainly something I'll follow up on and give you a view of when that number would be available. But that's, as we discussed before, that's the reason why at this point there haven't been numbers.
Moving on to Cal, and this kind of points out to some of the detail really that is which of the leisure centres and which of the council assets are going to remain clear in this budget. And those decisions, have they been made yet? Or are they, are we deciding how much we've put in this coming year? And if so, I should imagine there's some strategy or rationalisation of how that money is going to be spent. So could we have some idea of which elements of CAL are going to remain open?
Councillor Davison, I think you did release a statement, didn't you, very recently, and we are investing a record amount of money, but I'll let you fill the details in.
Yeah, I'm sure Councillor Lawson is aware of the figure there when we talked just over the 6 million, which we've made public. That includes the core grant that we provide. There's some elements of that which is following through from COVID as well, and obviously we've put in monies there in terms of underwriting the energy costs and increases. The straightforward answer is those discussions are continuing within CAL. So CAL are out to consultation. I can't remember if when that's finishing, but they are consulting primarily with their members around the future of the three sites in particular. Our officers are working very closely with CAL now, again, as we discussed, in terms of looking at for the next financial year in light of the extra funding. But in terms of, certainly as far as I'm aware at this point, and there's certainly nothing being reported back to us about final decisions, I think we're, I wouldn't say a long way away, because those decisions will have to happen relatively quickly, but very keen to make sure, and we were, that consultation took place first, that the results of that are then analysed, and also some follow-up discussions, which I understand are happening with community groups as well. So it's in process. We haven't got, again, any specific deadlines that I'm aware of, and certainly no specific decisions at this stage. But the intention is to provide the best possible balanced service that we can across the borough. Whether that means we can provide that across all of the three sites or other sites, I think essentially, that's what's being looked at the moment. Again, it would be nice if we had specifics we could talk about today, but unfortunately we haven't. But in one way, I think that's a good thing, because what it's demonstrating is something that people were rightly concerned about, what people saw as a lack of consultation before.
single question with no supplementary here, which is about Oakenshaw. Vision in the budget for the replacement of Oakenshaw Cross. If there isn't provision in this particular year's budget, this Oakenshaw Cross, I would point out and ask. The 11 Emily Cross suffered a similar disastrous kind of quickly and back on its own site. So I asked the question: is there provision in this budget to replace that cross? And if not, why not?
Councillor Mather?
Your question, Councillor Lawson, I did say a couple of councils ago and the last cabinet that there isn't sufficient funding at the moment. We are going to be asking, doing an online consultation to see where people would like the monument to be replaced, and then decide which options to pursue. At the moment, we're talking about a maximum of £500,000. So at the moment, there isn't sufficient monies to say when it will be placed back and where. I told you that last time. Thank you.
Yeah, last question. Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that. That's a no then. Last question. And it's about again, it's back to the sort of the structure of the budget really. We're asking for 18.6 million, I believe, in efficiencies and savings from to other years. This is quite a lot to ask in terms of efficiencies and savings. Our budget amendments last year would have fitted quite nicely into that envelope. I'll just put that out there. It's a lot to ask. I've had a look in some of the impact briefings in the report. A lot of work expected of directories to bring these services, these savings into line. How confident are we, and what mechanism do you have in place to monitor those services being made?
Absolutely right. It's a very significant challenge, and I no way would try and make it sound any easier than that in any regard. So in terms of achieving this, in terms of confidence levels, I'll put it very straightforwardly. We have to achieve them, and I think that's the mindset in which we, both as an administration and a senior management team, have gone into this. There isn't an option B in that regard, because in terms of our reserves, we really are taking the maximum that we can in order to continue with a semblance of solid reserves, and certainly Eamon would be very quickly pointing out to us if we did anything differently, and of course that would take us into very dangerous territory in terms of Section 114s. In terms of driving this, what I've been discussing with the senior team, both the Chief Exec and the strategic directors, is that we have a very clear oversight board that drives this in the same way as we would, we drove improvements within children's services with a rigour, with an improvement board and a very clear focus. And that would be, that is in the process of being looked at and being set up. That would look at our numbers, I say on a monthly basis. They would be looked at probably more than that, but certainly at the very minimum, a monthly basis. And the clarity on variances would be very much in front of the senior team to then put together any mitigation plans immediately. There isn't, there isn't time for us to wait a month, 2 months, 3 months for some actions to be put in place. Literally, every week counts in the next financial year and leading up to the financial year as well. So that's currently, there's an element of that already in place. There is an overview on the current savings. That's going to be strengthened further. I'll certainly be involved in that, very much so. I've been very clear that in my role, I have to be at those meetings with the senior team. There is a complete commitment, absolute commitment from the senior. So in terms of confidence, I'm confident that we have the right mindset. I'm confident that the management team understand there is no plan B or other option but to achieve these numbers. In terms of other areas outside of our control, I can't, sit here and say that we can control that. But in terms of our internal plans and what we can control, yes, I feel confident that we can achieve this. But it's a huge challenge. It's a stretch, and the thing that a number of things really concern me. I've said this before. One is going to be our staff and the pressures on our staff, and we have to work really hard to make sure that we're not burning out people, and the fact that we will delay or not even recruit obviously causes issues in that side of things. That's well understood, and we'll focus on that. And also being honest and open with our residents and explaining to them where we are. So I think that's another crucial aspect of this, is that whole communications. We're certainly are not going to go into this next financial year hiding behind anything. There's going to be transparency, and we will be talking to people both inside the council and outside the council as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes my questions. I wouldn't want to bring anything else before debate. That would be like having pudding before dinner. So,
thank you for your questions, and I'm assuming that you won't have any more questions at council, which is brilliant. But anyway, first of all, to cabinet members and officers alike, but I'll touch on that in a minute. But just to quickly recap in terms of what I've heard so far in terms of Councillor Lawson, regional disparity needs to be a massive issue, and that is something that we're actually addressing. We did manage to get the devolution deal. Although we managed to get the devolution deal, there's still a long way to go in terms of making sure that we level up the north properly compared to the south. In terms of, you mentioned that they came out pretty late, and Councillor Davis is spot on that. We're trying to actually improve year on year, but you probably are aware that every year the process gets tighter and tighter and tighter. We used to have the autumn statement, you probably remember. Now we don't have an autumn statement. It's still called an autumn statement, but it's still in spring by the time we actually understand the details. But in spring there will be a spring mini fiscal event that's organised by the government. So as soon as this budget is released, events will take over, because we'll get another set of budget headline figures that we may need to adjust our budget. You also recall, Councillor Lawson, that we should have had our budget meeting in February, because of the timescales that are so tight that are set by government. Because as soon as Christmas was over, our office was really hard to pull these papers together. So I completely share your frustration, like any other councillors on this council, that things are very, very tight. That's why we had to delay the budget meeting to March, because we are trying to get our heads around as well, and the officers also need to do the detailed work. In terms of the deficit you mentioned, the £90 million savings, it's got to be an approach that's on a partnership basis. It's going to be even more difficult, and the year after that even more. And our reserves can only be spent once, and in a couple of years' time, we will be down to the minimum unless we actually put some measures in place. So it's going to get worse unless things change nationally. So that's why we have to work extremely closely with our exec team, with the chief exec. Cabinet members are working extremely hard. I've never seen this cabinet work or any other cabinet work as hard, not because any of the cabinet was not as good, but it's just that time so decisions are so pertinent to make to actually save the council. We also need to make sure that councillors are engaged. not just the cabinet, but all the councillors, 69 councillors, because they have a responsibility back to the community, because that is what they're elected for, to try the best. At the same time, we need to carry our staff with us, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to get the wrong message going out to staff and our partners, because when we talk about the council can only do what it does if it works with the partners, both from a private sector, the public sector, NHS, for example, and the voluntary and community sector. So it's really, really important. But once you get all that sorted out, how do you keep the community on board? Because community confidence in a modern democracy is so important. And we will try our best to make sure, like we are doing with the CAL consultation, talk to every single group and as many people that are there, because that two-way communication is so important. So the people might not agree, but people at least understand the pressures we are in. And our residents also need to feel that, we are trying more than our level best to work as hard. And also we've got to engage with government. Only this week I was in a meeting with Lord Parkinson, who is part of the DCMS team. And we were arguing, amongst other things, the need for the grant for energy to be provided to leisure and sports centres, because as you know, at the moment, the grants are only available for museums, arts galleries, and government in their wisdom, I don't know what wisdom that is, but in their wisdom, they've said that leisure and swimming pools are not energy reliant. Well, we know that swimming pools are actually heavily reliant on energy. So that's just some of the observations from my point of view. But again, just going back to some of the comments that came from my cabinet, I've never known a situation in this council, and I've been on the council for 22 years, where there is so much uncertainty moving forward. I thought austerity was a massive issue for all councils up and down the country, but what is actually devastating, and it's going to actually cripple a lot of the councils, and I really, really feel sorry for the councils that are in the brinks of bankruptcy, literally. We aren't there yet, but we have to make sure that we try our best. Prices and inflation, let's hope they come down, but the projections are that, they are just projections. There's a lot of national, international variances that we have to rely on. At the same time, over the last 13 years, we've lost 60 pence in the pound. That equates to £200 million since 2010 that we've lost. And austerity has basically cut the council to its bare minimum. The next round of cuts will be very, very challenging, and I don't know what more we can cut. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we protect the most vulnerable, we protect public services as best we can, and at the same time, we create the ambition and that growth that Councillor Davis mentioned, and that is underpinning the £1 billion of 10 years of investment that we are still going to march on with, because we have to grow the economy. We can't cut ourselves out of this. We have to grow at the same time. It's a one-year plan. And one of the things that we are arguing nationally is to have a 10-year plan like the NHS. The NHS has a 10-year plan that they work towards. Even if they give us a 3-year plan, at least it will give us some horizons to actually plan to and work towards. But at this moment in time, it's just that, we're working on a year-by-year basis in terms of how we set our budgets forward. And on a final note, thank you very much for all the Cabinet members who have been working extremely hard. Since we came back after Christmas and before Christmas. We've been having away days, roundtables, one-to-ones, and with our exec team, we've been trying to actually do the best we can. And again, thank you very much for the Cabinet. Thank you to our exec team and all our officers and our finance staff, especially Eamon, who's actually put a lot of hard work in this. And it's not easy. But you mentioned the whole council. One way to actually get through this is to actually, yes, give us that challenge, but at the same time, help us achieve what we're trying to achieve. And the interest for all councillors at the bottom line is making sure that every single resident feels that they've been listened to, and we work towards their best interest. I don't want to say too many things because I'll probably get emotional because it is going to be very difficult. But we will be debating this at the Budget Council on 8th of March, and I look forward to all the group's amendments. And the bottom line is, right, is we are in this together because we are councillors of this council. No, I'd like to second Councillor Paul Davis's budget proposals. Can I have a quick show of hands and we move on? Thank you very much, members. And that's the end of that meeting. And once again, thank you very much for all your time. Goodbye.